This is The World This Weekend. Good evening, I'm Kayla Hounsell. Tonight, some good news for the Northwest Territories where people are slowly being allowed back home after wildfire evacuations.
It's like a relief to know that we're able to head back and actually be in an environment that we're used to.
Also tonight, an unfolding political scandal in Ontario is putting Premier Doug Ford's plan to develop the province's Greenbelt under scrutiny. And President Joe Biden is in hurricane-hit Florida, visiting his second disaster zone in the past month.
No winds this strong had hit this area in 100 years. Pray God it'll be another 100 years before this happens again.
That's later, but we begin tonight with some encouraging news from Yellowknife. Weeks after being forced to flee to the south, residents will be able to return to their homes just days from now. The news is a welcome relief for evacuees and for the essential workers who stayed behind. People like Northwest Territories Wildfire Information Officer Mike Westwick.
Every single one of us who are responding to this is affected in some way. Loved ones, friends, family, all displaced, and we're just as eager to see them get home, and we're very happy that we've been making the progress we have to support that.
The CBC's Natalie Pressman is one of the thousands of Yellowknifers who went south to Calgary because of the fires, and that's where she was when I spoke with her earlier today. Natalie, what do we know about the city's re-entry plans?
Well, we know that as of Wednesday afternoon, residents will be allowed to re-enter the city. So it's a phased re-entry plan where essential workers will be let back in first, and that includes people who work at the water treatment plant, for example, the solid waste facility. Outside of city employees, the hospital has been calling back some of its staff. The idea is that those essential personnel are planned to return on Monday and Tuesday, and then beginning Wednesday at noon, residents will be able to start coming back into the capital.
That is welcome news, I'm sure. And now that residents are allowed to return, does that mean it's no longer dangerous?
So the reentry actually still has residents on an evacuation alert, which means that they can be asked to leave again at any time. So the fire nearest the capital is currently classified as held, which means it's not expected to grow significantly more. Yellowknife residents and residents of the neighboring communities of Detta and Delo should know that they're not coming back to a city operating as usual. So the mayor says that folks should maybe be prepared with a couple days worth of groceries to avoid overrunning the stores. And Rebecca Alty also says it will take a while before all healthcare services are operational.
It will still be very, very basic services, particularly when it comes to the hospital. So anybody with health conditions that need dialysis, if you're farther along in your pregnancy, chemotherapy, it wouldn't be safe for you to come home on that September 6th date. You should remain down south where you can get the care that you need.
So the health authority has said that there will be emergency services, but it could take up to a month to get all the services back up and running. And of course, this whole plan is conditional on weather.
Right. And what can you tell us about the other communities that have been evacuated?
Right. Well, there are still 5 other communities in the South Slave who have been evacuated, and they're still waiting for news of when they can re-enter their homes. Hay River is one that we've really had our eyes on in the past couple of days. The fire there is burning very close to town. Yesterday was expected to be an extremely challenging day, but we got news that the firefighters were able to successfully defend the town and no new structures were lost. My understanding is that the forecast is for slightly cooler temperatures today, so still challenging conditions, but hopefully that does give some opportunity to fight the fire. In another one of the big hubs, there's a fire burning near Fort Smith, about just over 3 kilometers away from the community. And the heavy smoke there has actually been acting as a kind of shield over the fire that's been keeping temperatures down a bit. And there's a chance of some rain today. So once again, hoping that that creates a bit of an opportunity for the firefighters.
Natalie, thank you.
Thanks.
The CBC's Natalie Pressman in Calgary tonight. And while some people are going home in the Northwest Territories, there's been frustration for some residents in British Columbia. It's been more than 2 weeks since Mike McCabe fled his home in West Kelowna. He says he's been trying all week to reach someone who will speak to him about the condition of his property. McCabe says by searching through social media, he thinks his home is still standing.
It's very stressful. I mean, it's less stressful for me because I think I still have a home, but very stressful for those that don't have a home or don't know. I know of another person up Rose Valley that they don't know.
400 active wildfires are still burning in BC. Matt McDonald with the BC Wildfire Service says it's particularly dry and hot in the northern part of the province.
Some really strong winds here over the next 48 hours. We're talking sustained winds of 30 to 40 kilometers an hour with gusts as high as 60 or even 70 kilometers an hour on the lee side of the Rockies. And it's really across the whole entirety of northern reaches of British Columbia.
Meanwhile, 26 properties on evacuation order in the Kamloops and Shuswap regions have now been dropped to alert status. There are calls in Ontario for a broader investigation into how protected Greenbelt land was open to developers. This follows several media outlets naming an unregistered lobbyist, only previously identified in an Integrity Commission report as Mr. X. It's one of two scathing probes into the land deal, but PC Premier Doug Ford has continued to defend his Greenbelt plan and as housing minister. Philip Lishanok has more.
In his report, Ontario's Integrity Commissioner didn't name Mr. X because he was an unregistered lobbyist. Now this mysterious development consultant has been identified to CBC News as John Mutton, the former mayor of Clarington, Ontario, about an hour's drive east of Toronto. The report says Mr. X was one of two consultants hired by a landowner to lobby the province to remove protected land from the Greenbelt, allowing rezoning for development. Opposition leader New Democrat Mart Stiles says private interests influenced public policy.
Ontario's land use policy shouldn't be run by anybody like Mr. X or any unregistered lobbyist.
Last month, in two separate reports, the province's Auditor General and Integrity Commissioner both found major flaws with the province's decision to remove land from the Greenbelt, a large ring of protected farmland, forest, and wetlands from Niagara Falls to Peterborough that's off limits to development. This week, Housing Minister Steve Clark took responsibility but blamed a senior staffer for deciding what land would be removed from protection.
I'm sorry that we didn't do a better job and that I personally didn't do a better job in terms of the oversight.
The Ethics Commissioner found that a small group of developers with connections to the government influenced the decision. Landowners and developers could realize more than $8 billion in potential profits.
Well, we're starting to see the money trail.
Mike Schreiner is leader of the Ontario Green Party. He says it all leads back to Premier Doug Ford.
Ford-connected insiders are making millions, so other Ford-connected insiders who they work for could make billions.
Duff Conacher is co-founder of Democracy Watch, a citizens advocacy group that pushes for government accountability. He says there are loopholes in the law that allow for secret lobbying.
Policymaking in government in Canada is the scandal. It allows for unethical, secret behavior, secret lobbying, and that is essentially corrupting policymaking across the country.
Conacher agrees with opposition leaders that there should be a public investigation with all communications made public. Failing that, there should be a police investigation.
There's enough evidence in the Integrity Commissioner's report and the Auditor General's report to give the RCMP full reason to do a full criminal investigation for breach of trust.
John Mutton and the Premier's office have not responded to CBC's requests for comment, but the Toronto Star quotes Mutton as saying he never lobbied for removal of lands from the Greenbelt. The RCMP says it's still considering whether or not to launch an investigation. Philip Lishanok, CBC News, Toronto.
U.S. President Joe Biden toured storm-ravaged Florida today. It is his second trip in less than 2 weeks to a state devastated by a natural disaster. Normally, in situations like these, partisan differences are set aside to help people in need. But with an election next year, it appeared presidential politics were at play in Florida today. Katie Nicholson reports.
Power crews in Live Oak, Florida surround a massive tree toppled earlier this week. by Hurricane Idalia. All along Florida's Big Bend, which bore the brunt of the punishing storm, people like Jimmy Butler still processing the damage and the task ahead.
It's the worst storm we've ever been through. And we're going to rebuild. It'll never be the same.
One sure sign of progress on the ground, a presidential tour of the disaster zone. The Bidens met with volunteers and local leaders in Live Oak to take in the damage and listen, but also to make this pledge.
People of Florida, if there's anything your state needs, I'm ready to mobilize that support. Anything they need related to these storms. Your nation has your back.
Noticeably absent from this visit, Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis.
Hello.
Though the two were talking throughout the hurricane, and as late as Friday, the governor even taking this call from the president while on his own tour.
We're in Horseshoe Beach now. It's pretty rough here, and there's a lot of folks putting stuff together.
DeSantis' office issued a statement saying the security preparations that would go into setting up a meeting with the president might impact recovery efforts in the rural area. This despite the fact DeSantis was in Live Oak just yesterday, and his office and FEMA carefully worked out the details of this presidential visit. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell.
And so when the president contacted the governor to let him know he was going to be visiting, we mutually agreed, the governor's team and my team mutually agreed on a place that would have minimal impact into operations.
DeSantis' decision, a break from tradition. It was just 2 years ago he and Biden toured the Surfside condo collapse together in Miami, after 98 people were crushed in the debris.
Well, thank you, Mr. President.
But back then, DeSantis wasn't seeking the Republican nomination. Whatever the reason for not showing today, DeSantis may have to work closely with Biden in the coming weeks. Idalia and its billions of dollars of damage, just the first major hurricane of what is shaping up to be a very active season. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Washington.
A general election campaign is underway in Argentina, and a political outsider is upending expectations. Javier Milei scored the largest share of the vote in primary elections. The ultra-libertarian wants to disband several government ministries, scrap Argentina's currency, and allow the sale of human organs. Mandy Sham now on how Milei is capturing the attention of Argentinians who say they've been failed by the system.
What I want is to set fire to the central bank. Lyrics jubilantly sung by presidential frontrunner Javier Milei, dressed in his signature leather jacket and unruly mop of hair as he pumps his fist and jumps along with a crowd.
Yo soy el rey de un mundo perdido.
Self-described as an anarcho-capitalist, the 52-year-old economist isn't one to stick to the norm. The former tantric sex coach and rock singer has a penchant for serenading hundreds of voters before blasting incendiary rhetoric at his political opponents. Like other anti-establishment politicians, Milei got started on television as a firebrand pundit before forming his own party, La Libertad Avanza. In a television broadcast last month, Milei furiously attacks a box representing the central bank. And while it may be an outlandish gesture, the symbolism is cutting. Milei says he would slash government spending and taxes and replace the peso with the US dollar in an effort to get inflation under control. The message resonates for Argentinians out on the streets, protesting their country's financial woes. Many voters feel they've been left behind by the two dominant parties, led by leftist Sergio Massa and center-right candidate Patricia Bullrich. Milei has positioned himself as the alternative, and he's followed the playbook of right-wing predecessors, like Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro or former U.S. President Donald Trump, by largely campaigning on social media.
El Ministerio de la Mujer lo voy a cerrar.
On platforms like TikTok, Milei vows to close the ministries of health, education, and gender equality. Gun restrictions would be loosened and abortion put to a referendum. Not all of his supporters align with his ideology, but they do agree on one thing. Argentina needs radical change, and Javier Milei is their answer. Mandy Sham, CBC News, Toronto.
In Tel Aviv, Israeli police fire stun grenades to break up violent clashes between a group of Eritrean government supporters and anti-government protesters. At least 114 people were injured, including 30 police officers. The violence broke out during an event marking the start of the Eritrean War of Independence against Ethiopia. President Isaias Afwerki is accused of human rights groups of leading a highly repressive regime. More than 25,000 asylum seekers from Eritrea live in Israel who say they will face persecution if they return. Similar clashes between the two groups have broken out in other parts of the world, including in Toronto and Edmonton earlier this month. Skilled workers in Nigeria now have an opportunity to work in Canada. This country is hoping to attract about 1.5 million people with a range of skills by 2025. The program is looking for people with certain expertise, including carpentry, plumbing, and welding. But labor experts in Nigeria argue this could lead to a mass exit of skilled workers while creating a gap that the Nigerian government would then need to address. Freelance reporter Ajek Mangut reports.
The present situation we're finding ourselves now, seriously, it's not funny.
N.W.T Gabriel has worked as a carpenter in northern Nigeria for about 10 years. He says it's a tasking job that doesn't pay enough. He's now looking for better opportunities abroad, including in Canada.
With our economy here and years, I'm sure it will be way, way better than what I'm doing here or what I am earning here.
Canada is turning to other countries to fill up the gap in its workforce, especially in construction, to help build more houses. Nigeria has thousands of such skilled workers.
Nigeria as a country doesn't need to be scared of this.
Daniel Obla is a public affairs analyst. He says the opportunity in Canada could have a negative impact on Nigeria's labor market.
There's going to be a mass exodus of skilled labor. But if the number already on ground is doubled, then even if that number goes out, we still have a good number in Nigeria that will take care of our local needs.
Relocating to Canada comes with its own challenges. Sidiko Olayinka, a public affairs commentator in Abuja, says the Canadian immigration system might not be as easy to navigate.
Even the Canadian government does not pay for you to come. Many Nigerians have to sell their properties, begging neighbors, church or mosque for money in order for them to travel to Canada to take these positions.
Eligible skilled workers will have to apply through Canada's Express Entry, an online system it uses to manage immigration applications. They are also expected to take English or French language tests and meet the benchmark score. If they qualify, thousands of skilled workers in the country, including N.W.T Gabriel, could be looking to take a shot at changing their fortunes.
If I can make it to Canada, I'm sure it will change my life entirely.
Ajek Mangut for CBC News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Cleanup is underway after a powerful storm made landfall today in parts of southern China. Crews used chainsaws to cut up trees brought down by Typhoon Saola. Southern regions, including Hong Kong, were lashed with heavy rain and winds up to 200 kilometers an hour. At least one person was killed in the city of Shenzhen when a tree fell on their vehicle. The typhoon has caused widespread disruptions to travel, with hundreds of flights canceled. Rail and ferry services had to be shut down, as well as schools and businesses. Saola is believed to be one of the strongest typhoons to hit the region since 1949. It's the start of a new school year for millions of students across Canada and around the world this week, including at the University of Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. All except for a group of 100 female Afghan students who were supposed to start their studies there as part of a scholarship program. The women were about to board their flight, but were turned back at the gate by Taliban officials. It's the latest setback for young Afghan women and girls determined to continue their education amid Taliban repression. Freelance reporter Abdul Sattar has more from Islamabad.
24-year-old Zartaj Khan was excited to leave Afghanistan and continue her education abroad. But her dreams were shattered when Taliban officials barred her and dozens of other scholarship students from boarding their flight to Dubai. Her name has been changed for her safety.
They were crying and shouting and said, why always Afghan girls, why? It's still not allow for me to continue my education.
Khan was studying law at Kabul University when the Taliban recaptured the city in 2021. She heard about the UAE scholarship program through a WhatsApp group. Khan applied with her father's full support.
He said, you go and continue education. Also, it's good to leave country because situation is so bad for you.
Taliban have highly conservative interpretations of the role of women in the society.
The former governor of Afghanistan's Paktia province, Muhammad Halim Fidai, says the Taliban's ban on women's education is not only part of their extremely conservative worldview, it also serves a political purpose.
They want to keep their extremist fighters united, since they have propagated a lot against women.
Taliban government refused to allow the girls who's coming to study here.
Billionaire Emirati businessman Khalaf Al-Habtoor is behind the scholarship program at the University of Dubai. In a video posted on social media, he said he hopes the Taliban will change their minds.
I hope Taliban government is going to reconsider my request to allow them to come. They have the right to study, they have the right to do whatever the men can do, and there is no exception to that.
The UAE have a very essential role in this condition.
Former Kabul University professor Nargis Mohammad Hassanzai says Al-Habtoor's generosity is admirable but won't change the lives of most Afghan women and girls. She says real change will only come if fellow Muslim countries pressure the Taliban to stop using religion as a reason to bar women from the classroom.
I think so. This is the responsibility of UAE that they have to say to the world and to talk with Taliban that it is not something in our religion. So please don't take religion as a hostage. And this is the time to talk with Taliban.
The Taliban has refused to comment on this incident. Zartaj Khan is now in hiding because of threats from the Taliban. She is appealing to Afghanistan's former allies like Canada to help women and girls like her. Abdul Sattar for CBC News, Islamabad.
You're listening to The World This Weekend on CBC Radio. I'm Kayla Hounsell. You can listen to this program anytime on the CBC Listen app or on the CBC News YouTube channel. Well, they say money talks, but for financially curious young people, you could say money TikToks. People are breaking down their budgets and sharing advice on the video sharing app. Jenna Bentrichit looks at whether the benefits outweigh the costs.
You don't buy anything on one day, so the next day you get to double your budget. Oh my God, yeah, that's what it is. I just saw it yesterday. Maybe you haven't heard of the phrase girl math, but like these students at Toronto Metropolitan University, you've probably applied its logic before.
It's cash, so it doesn't count. Yeah, somebody told me about this yesterday, actually.
I use girl math every day.
Girl math is a term for the mental gymnastics we do to justify our spending. It's one of a few recent TikTok trends that encourages people to be transparent about their financial choices, including the ones that make us feel guilty.
This is just obvious girl math, but if I buy a $300 purse but I use it every single day, it's going to cost less than $1 a day, which is basically free.
Alyssa Davies is a personal finance blogger near Calgary. She makes TikToks like the one you just heard to start honest conversations about money. Girl math pokes fun at negative stereotypes about women, she says, but it can also be a window into someone's piggy bank.
When you see people talking about their money, it's really intriguing because we're so desperate to know whether people can actually afford their lifestyle or if this is just some sort of facade.
But there's another reason why these trends are so popular.
And I just started talking about money online for the first time to hold myself accountable.
That's why some people post a breakdown of their budgets or walk through a payday routine, sharing how much of their income goes to savings and bills and how much is left over for fun.
I paid off my credit card in full at $1,100, and then I put aside $583 for my rent, $243 for my car payment, leaving me with $229 left over.
Jordan Dawes is a financial planner near Victoria who also uses TikTok. though he posts more traditional financial advice like this.
On that day that money comes into your account, you need to have set amounts aside so that you pay yourself first.
He says TikTok has made him a better advisor, and most of his videos are inspired by conversations with clients or friends. But the waters of financial TikTok can be choppy to wade through, even when it comes to girl math.
I would hope that it's used for humor and not taken literally, but I've been around enough financial institutions to know that people can take those things seriously.
Sam Lightman, a financial planner in London, Ontario, said there's a distinction between people sharing their budgets versus telling others how to use their finances.
It gets to cross the line when people start talking about where they invest their money, how you should invest your money, and what amounts they're putting on debt, and if you should be doing the same thing.
When Toronto marketing student Janet Merchant scrolls through her feed, she gets all sorts of videos with financial advice.
I am in business, so seeing all that finance stuff, I'm like, okay, now I get it. It's a bit easier than my lectures, yeah.
She says it's an accessible way to learn about money, but she usually takes it with a grain of salt. Jenna Benchitrit, CBC News, Toronto.
To stop for any tequila drinkers that might be out there tonight.
As we close our show tonight, we're pouring one out for the sun-kissed bard of South Florida, Jimmy Buffett. The American singer-songwriter and businessman died Friday at 76 years old.
Wasting away again at Margaritaville, searching for my lost sugar song.
Buffett's rabid fans, called parrot heads, loved him for his unique Gulf and Western sound, a fusion of pop, rock, country, and calypso, with lyrics celebrating a life of leisure. The perfect soundtrack for sweating out a hangover at a beachside resort or chowing down on a cheeseburger at a backyard barbecue.
Cheeseburger in paradise, heaven on earth with an onion slice.
Unlike the characters in his songs, Jimmy Buffett was no loafer. Over his 5-decade career, he produced 27 studio albums, wrote best-selling books, acted in countless movies and TV shows, and started a successful restaurant chain. His business ventures eventually landing him on the Forbes list of America's richest celebrities in 2016.
The sun is hot and that old clock is moving slow, and so am I.
Not afraid to share the spotlight, Jimmy Buffett shared the stage and studio with the likes of the Eagles' Glenn Frey, indie rockers Florence and the Machine, and country superstar Alan Jackson. This 2003 song with Jackson earned Buffett his first top 40 since the 1970s, and the first ever award of his career.
It's only 12:30, but I don't care. You don't care. I don't care. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
In 2001, Buffett covered this song.
Mademoiselle, voulez-vous danser?
Mademoiselle, Voulez-vous danser by PEI singer Lenny Gallant. The two would go on to write a number of songs together. Gallant told CBC PEI's Main Street earlier this year how that collaboration came to be.
It was a little embarrassing because when he first called, it was noisy where I was, and I hadn't heard from him for quite a while. And I thought he called, and I thought his name was Jimmy. He said his name was Jimmy Doucette calling, and he wanted to write some songs. And so I was being polite and everything, and he was saying, "Yeah, I can see you're busy," but you know. And it wasn't until the end of the conversation when he said something about his seaplane that I realized who I was talking to. So I was on the cusp of blowing off Jimmy Buffett when he wanted to write a song together.
How it got here, I haven't a clue.
We'll leave you tonight with a little more of Margaritaville. We hope you enjoy your long weekend just as Jimmy would have wanted, with your feet up and a cold drink at your side. You've been listening to The World This Weekend. I'm Kayla Hounsell. Good night.
Some people claim that there's a woman to blame, but I think, hell, it could be my fault.
Great show, Kayla.